Hello and welcome to the Old Street Labs podcast. As always, I'm your host, Rob Woodhead, and this is the little introduction to my conversation that I just had. This one was a bit different. We had two guests on today, Scott Evans and Richard Geary. Both of them are AI consultants, having their own businesses to help other businesses in the adoption of AI. Great conversation around what they're seeing at the moment in the market, how companies are adopting, some of the issues they're facing of fear within the ranks, not really understanding what AI can do, not really understanding all the capabilities, but also the governance and policies you need in place to make sure it is adopted properly. It's all moving very fast, isn't it? So trying to keep up with that is really interesting. And we spoke about what they're seeing, how they're seeing it, and also what they think the future holds for businesses and AI. They also together have founded the AI Foundry, which is a collective, a networking opportunity, a resource hub for people who want to learn more about AI, maybe a bit scared about what's going on, want to kind of understand what they can do to incorporate it into their businesses or even into their lives. So that was really interesting, and hope you find it interesting as well. As always, do drop me a note if you want to ask me any questions or give me any feedback. And that is all for the intro. I hope you enjoy the podcast today. The human stories behind the tech, from concept to code. Real startup journeys. Hello and welcome to the Old Street Labs podcast. Great to have you back with us. On today's podcast, I'm very lucky to have two fabulous guests, which is a bit different to normal. The first guest is Scott Evans. He is the founder of Wonderland AI, who they help senior leaders and their teams cut through the AI hype and actually get results. He spent 8 years delivering digital transformation in financial services and fintech before going out on his own. And second guest is Richard Geary. He is the founder of Flow HQ, helping business owners make practical AI decisions that fit real budgets and real workflows. He spent 25 years in corporate tech, including senior roles at Salesforce and SeatGeek. And together, they have founded the AI Foundry, which we're going to speak a bit about today. Scott and Richard, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, it's great to have you both on. So the title of the podcast is The Humans Behind the Tech. And so I think this is always an interesting place to start, is understanding a little bit about the journeys of you both and how you've got to where you've got to. So Scott, maybe we can start with you. You kind of started Wonderland AI about a year ago, jumping out of Soldo. Be interesting to hear this story about how you've got to where you got to and the decision to jump in and do your own thing.
Yeah, sure. So it's actually, I think it's month 10 that I'm in with the business now. So it's gone fast. It's been frantic, but it's been absolutely amazing. So I think I've always wanted to start my own business, but I never really knew what I wanted to do it in. I just thought that I wanted to do anything to do with sports. So it was never to do with like AI or tech or anything. It was always to do with sports, but trying to find those opportunities. Everyone wants to work in sports and music and everything else. And the opportunities and like the salaries just not kind of there. So I kind of fell into a world of finance, completely different to sport. And I found myself there for quite a long time. And in my previous role, I kind of just found that it was like the Christmas of 2024. I was sat in another meeting with the same people, not being challenged, pretty much in like a bit of a deflated team. And I just didn't feel like I had any drive or purpose. I kind of lost my mojo. And at that point, I thought, you know what, I'm going to make a New Year's resolution that I'm going to stick to. And because I've pretty much not stuck to any apart from, quitting smoking. But I thought, you know what, I'm going to do this, the New Year's resolution, and I'm going to quit my job in May. I have no idea what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do it. So that kind of gave me a buffer to then kind of sit down and go, right, okay, what do you want to do? What do you want to go in? And I'd been working with artificial intelligence for generative AI for probably about probably about 8 to 10 months by that point, and I was teaching people in the company how to kind of use it using ChatGPT. I know that's called shadow AI, but that wasn't a term back then. And then I was teaching also my family as well, and quite a few of them were saying, "Look, you seem to know a lot about this, and you're pretty good at teaching, if I don't say so myself." And they said, "Why don't you try and do this? Why don't you try and teach people?" And then off the back of that, I went hell for leather, and I was like, "I'm going to build an AI business and try and teach people how to use it," because everybody looks petrified. So that's kind of where I got to today, and it's been one hell of a journey in just 10 months. So God knows what's going to happen in the next year.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, tip of the hat to you for taking the leap, because I think I meet a lot of founders, and that leap is quite it's a risk, right? It's a risk that you take to jump into something new, but sometimes you feel like you just have to. It doesn't feel like you're being brave. It just feels like an inevitable choice that you're making.
Yeah, without a doubt. My wife, still don't think she's happy with me. My 3-year-old, and my newborn don't know really yet. So, I'm trying to plug away, but it seems to be the right kind of idea for me. And I've met amazing people like Richard along the way, and built some cool things. So, no complaints so far.
And Richard, you took a similar leap about a year ago as well.
Yeah, different circumstances, I guess. I think I'd worked constantly since I was about 14. In all reality, I got into my mid-40s. I know I don't look it, and I had I've done some amazing things. I built some amazing teams. I delivered some amazing technologies to global businesses around the world. But ultimately, you look at those things and you think they're just technology, right? They disappear. 3 years, 5 years, they're replaced. When I moved to my last role, I got the ability to build something from scratch. The idea of legacy starts to creep in as you get a bit older, right? Things that you want to leave things better than you found them. And so we built a team there. We got that business up and running, did some amazing things. And I was spending a hell of a lot of time in New York. I've got a young family. And I was effectively given the opportunity to step away from that. We built it to a place where it didn't need me. I'm a builder, not a maintainer. And so I took the big decision that it felt like at the time to take a year out. And I very purposely didn't entertain new roles at that point in time. We were very fortunate. We just finished renovating a house. I built the office that I'm sitting in now. And I did really practical things, which was something I'd not done for a focused amount of time for a long time. But during that time, my brain needs to be exercised as well. So it was like, oh, AI is the thing. Let's look into that. And I dabbled a little bit, but never really seriously seen under the hood as such. But one of the things I noticed in that time out was I was fortunate enough to work with sort of the 1% of the 1% of businesses out there, right? Huge budgets, global footprint, those kind of things. But actually there's this massive underserved population effectively of businesses who could benefit from all of these tools and all the experience that I've seen, but weren't served really. There were, no players, consolidated players in that space. And so I found myself walking in and out of high street shops, asking weird questions to them about their processes and, getting various different responses. And AI became the big technology for me. I've never met a problem that I didn't want to solve, and it became a capability. I think it is a capability, right? That could sit across many things and make real change for people. So I worked with a few smaller businesses before my business even existed. I've got a good friend who's a cabinet maker, and we're like, well, how could this impact your business? And we took proposal generation from like 2 to 3 hours to 14, 15 minutes with a drawing, with a customer facing proposal and those kind of things. And I was like, yeah, there's really something here. And that's where Flow HQ came about. It was like, how do we look at businesses that are underserved, bring that 25 years of experience effectively, and focus on how AI can be an accelerator or a gap closer in actual fact, as a capability to those businesses. And that's where I ended up. Yeah. And then as part of the networking and meeting people in the UK who are doing similar things, Scott and I met with a group of other people. Scott will tell you the origin story of that, I'm sure. And we were like, how can we leverage the experience, the weight in this room to almost market ourselves as a bigger business? And that's where the idea of the AI Foundry came from. We then kind of looked at, that's great, that's the business side of it, but how do we bring people into the enablement part of it? And that's where the free community and the access and the resources and the thought leadership stuff came about. It's a very long answer to a very short question.
No, I love it. the taking a year out, I've done a few of those in my career, and I've found them incredibly helpful to refocus and think, spend a bit of time mulling over what you really want to do. And so I recognise that completely.
Yeah, massively. I think there's this, like, it's really hard to change your trainers when you're already on the treadmill, right?
100%.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to see what else is out there if you're, as you say, running down the road or running on the treadmill, and not noticing everything else that's going on. So it's also an interesting time to have done it, right? You've seemed to have timed it pretty well with the whole AI wave coming through. So that's great. Tell us a bit more about AI Foundry then. What is it, and what exactly are you aiming for with it?
So I can tell you a little bit of the origin of it, and then Richard's way more articulate than I am, as you can tell. So I'll kind of pass it over to him after. But like Richard said, I started off trying to find out more about AI, and I wanted to collaborate with people because I knew I wanted to do a business in it. And at the time, there wasn't that many people, so I kind of joined this community, and I was trying to look for people in the UK that were also doing the same thing, because a lot of them were in like the US, some of them were in like Southern Hemisphere and stuff like that. I managed to find like a group, I think it was like 9 people. I was like, look, why don't we go to a Brewdog in Paddington? We'll sit down, we'll geek out, we'll talk about AI, and we'll have a couple of pints. And off the back of that, now that was just a WhatsApp group with 9 of us in. That's now grown to, I think it's 102 in that WhatsApp group. And then as part of that conversation in that group, like Richard said, we were trying to look at how could we come together as a collaborative effort to be something bigger than just our one-person entities at the time, and get in front of people and try and help people as well. And off the back of that, myself and Richard and our other co-founders, we sat down and we had what we think is the great idea, that is the AI Foundry, where we are offering free community space for business owners, business leaders, but anyone really. You can come in there. It's a safe space where you can ask questions, get information that you won't necessarily be able to find on your own, get resources at the click of a button. And also we're introducing events that we do quarterly, where we want to try and get people together, because people love being with people. We want to get people together talking about AI. And if we can also get those business leaders and those people in business talking to the AI businesses that we also have as well, then it's even better. Everyone's a winner then.
Yeah, fascinating. Richard, what was your take on the AI Foundry and the purpose behind it, and where you're seeing it going?
Yeah, I think the thing that's always stuck with me, I think, is that once you start to lead a team or own a business, you're the founder, there's this expectation that you know everything, right? You've got the answer to everything. And I think there's not really a safe space for people to say, I don't know. And especially when it comes to AI, it's impossible to know, right? I think AI is different to any other technology in the speed it moves, right? It's not having to create roads or technologies in order to propagate in ways that other things did. The car got to 1 billion units in about 100 years. The mobile phone was about 15 years. Personal computers were 20 years. AI is going to be about 7 max, may even happen later this year, right? If the numbers keep working as they are. And so the profilation of that, or propagation of that technology, is rapid. If you're running a business, we talked about, like, as you work on something, you miss the other things that happen around you, right? So keeping up with AI technology is a full-time job. If you're trying to do that, I still struggle, and it is my full-time job. And it was just a safe space to say, I don't know about AI, but it's like, I don't know yet. So how do I find out? How do I find my peers? How do I find the use cases that are working for them? How do I find technologies that are adjacent to the problem I'm trying to solve? So we do a decent amount in there around one-to-one stuff with people. We'd obviously love more people in that community. The more people there are, the more perspectives, opinions, experiences there are, and that becomes more valuable over time. We do a bit of thought leadership and stuff in there. We're really just trying to provide those embryonic resources of, like, I'm starting out and I'm kind of anxious to say I don't know, but it's absolutely fine to say we don't know. It's just a safe space. And then it's actually become almost a vehicle effectively for that real world interaction. I think we all, as business people, end up at networking things, and we have various levels of dread around those. We want to put together events that are genuinely like, just come along and talk. It's not about what can I do for you or what can you do for me. It's about, like, we've all got a common problem here. Can I walk away with one practical tip or one perspective that I didn't have before and take value from that day on day. When I do AI training, it's always like you should be able to do something 5 minutes after this training finishes that you couldn't do previously, and it should have some value to you in your process, in your domain, in your expertise. And I like those events to be the same. We kind of mix up the structure. The one we're doing this time is really around building an AI strategy for a business. I think that's a really good place to start. Often people will buy a tool, then go looking for a problem to use that tool on. We are proponents of the exact opposite of that. Understand your processes, understand your pain points, what your problems are, what your opportunities are, then go and buy the appropriate tool to actually deliver value against that need, find a solution that works. And then it's about the enablement and education of yourself and the people in your businesses to use those tools most effectively. So hopefully we're a bit different to the kind of normal AI hype stuff. We're not going to 100x your revenue in day one. We might over a year if we work together. But those reality-based conversations where it's okay to come in not knowing a lot, be open, be curious, be anxious if you want, and that safe space to do that. As Scott said, mixing the audiences this time, so bringing those AI business owners together with people who are AI curious or AI starters. We've got a couple of speaking guests this time around. Maddie from Humble AI, who is just one of the most genuinely lovely and intelligent people I've met in a very long time through networking, weirdly enough. And someone called Hannah, who I, again, met through a peer-to-peer board, effectively, who focuses on sales coaching. So bringing those skills to an audience that both need the tools, but also the skills to use those tools, I think is really impactful.
I think, that all sounds very helpful for people out there. I think the fact that you speak about the fear that people have and being genuine about even the fact that you don't know everything, I think it's in a world where the news flow and the pace of change is so fast, it's quite scary. I put something on LinkedIn the other day about just being like, I feel, I work in a tech business, I run a tech business. I feel like I'm behind most of the time in what's going on, what the latest model is, what the latest, best product is to use. And so for anyone who's in a business, who's running that business, to then go, right, I've got this new tool, this new capability out there that I need to kind of get my handle on. It's really hard for them. And so having people out there who are like, okay, well, you can come to this open, friendly place and, come and learn. I think that's incredibly helpful.
Well, we thought so too. So
yeah.
Hopefully others will in time.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I mean, I run a founder network, not in AI space, but more for kind of any tech startup founders. And it's very much on that idea of come along and have a chat with people who are doing it. There aren't any answers. There's no one standing up front saying, I've got all the answers and telling you what to do. It's more kind of coming and understanding. And it's a similar vibe to that, which I really appreciate. What are you therefore, seeing as the adoption then? It sounds like you're focused on the people who are really on the beginning of it, right? If you're talking about the strategy, you're talking about the very early stage. Is that what you're seeing? Is that most people are in that early piece of education and need a bit of consulting before they even go anywhere near bringing in tools and building things?
I think it's a total mix in reality. I think if you think about the bell-shaped curve, right, the adoption curve, we're definitely on the up curve. We're in the early adopters phase for sure. We're seeing just massive variation is the reality. And as you kind of look up and down the budget variance as well matters hugely, right? I think if you're a founder or a small business owner, you spend so much time working in the business. When do you get the focused time to work on it? And I think that's hopefully what we provide a little bit, is that safe space to both think about it, but also have the time to do something about it. Then we look across, anxiety, fear. Is AI going to take my job? The robots are coming, right? Yeah. What's an agent going to do? All those things. There are so many things to be wary of. And that's why I think for Scott and I, correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, we believe like the enablement is such a foundational thing to get right. Because buying a license is a step in a process. It's not the beginning and end of a process. So, if you run Microsoft and you buy Copilot, or you're in a Google workspace and you add Gemini into that, yes, it's a tool, but the learning around how to use that tool, and what I think is different about AI specifically is if you bought, I worked in SaaS businesses for many years. If you bought SaaS, you bought it, it was configured for you, you used it in the way it was configured. What's different about AI is you're giving a tool which is then really a a doorway to capabilities, how you use that tool matters more than any other business tool I've ever seen rolled out. So I think the adoption and the rollout is a very different process, because experimentation is part of the process for the first time ever. So when you walk into a extended leadership group of like 80 people and you're like, right, we're all going to experiment, everyone looks panicked, because that's not what we do in business, right? The creative arts are better at it. They will play at things till it feels right. For most people, they want to be given a process they follow and they just do that ad infinitum. And what I'm saying here is, here's a capability. You and it are going to collaborate to figure out what your best process is, and then you can think about locking that in and using that on an ongoing, repeatable basis. Most businesses are scared of like quality and consistency being the two biggest measures they need to hold dear, right? And AI gives you the ability to massively vary across that. You and I, with the same tool in the same business, with a nuanced difference in our prompts, would get very different results. So I think for me, rollout is around understanding your problems, really understanding your business processes. I do this people, process, technology thing. And then I think about how you define, how you align, and how you deliver. So I've got kind of a 9-box going on. It's a good structure to put in mind, I think, because buying a tool is great. Understanding the problems you want to leverage that tool against is great. Understanding how you train the people to use that tool to get the results you want is great. And then how do you have a refinement and kind of improvement process ongoing after that? Those are the basics, I think, of what AI rollout looks like, which is fairly different to what traditional software or SaaS buying would be.
Yeah, that does sound scary to people in business, right? Who are,
really,
as you say, driven by process. They keep getting it wrong, though, Scott. I think I've seen on some things you've written about people try and implement AI. They get the Copilot licenses, and then 6 months later, no one's using them. Why does that keep happening, do you think?
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons, really. So, like Richard said, people are just running for the shiny tool, but the biggest part of AI adoption is enablement. There's a huge lack of understanding about what AI is, what it can do. And there's also, I think there's like a lack of urgency around AI literacy and upskilling people in the business. So everyone's seeing the media and they're going, you need to get AI now, or it's going to replace the whole workforce with one agent, which is BS, by the way. You need to really just focus down and look at, okay, maybe get Copilot licenses, or get a selection of Copilot licenses for like a champion group that has like 4 people in there. Get them to test it out, see what use cases they can come up with, see what business problems they think could actually be solved by using AI. Don't just start flooding it out to everyone and go, here you go, start using that, because the adoption rate is just going to drop massively. People are going to they're scared of the technology anyway. People are also very skeptical about what it does and how it does it. So you need to be able to, like I said, have like a consolidated group that maybe start to use it, but really start to upskill and teach people how to use it. My wife, for instance, right? My wife's a teacher. I have an AI business. In fact, I have 2 AI businesses if you count the AI Foundry, right? She has not even clicked on Copilot. When I asked her if she'd used Copilot, she said, is it that rainbow looking button on Outlook? And I just had to shake my head. So people just don't know how to use it or what it does. And I think that's one of the problems. We need to just make sure that we're not shoving new tech at people. We need to nurture them. We need to, like Richard said, you need to be creative with it. It's new technology, so you need to learn how to use it, learn where it can fit in your business processes, what pain points it can alleviate. All of that kind of stuff is super important. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of businesses are missing because of, like I said, the media and lots of pressure and the charlatans online, saying that like Richard said, we'll 10x whatever process. I think that they're the issues. People are just getting scared into doing it. You have time. The industry is moving fast, but you have time to adopt it. Just small consolidated group, test it out, see what pain points you have, and then do something off the back of it.
So it's almost like I was speaking about the bell curve of adoption earlier. It's almost like within a business you have that bell curve. So you're choosing the people, the early adopters, to get on board, to understand it, to reduce the fear factor for everyone else. Is that kind of what?
I definitely see that. I think what I'm seeing actually move the needle effectively in bigger businesses is some form of basic education for everybody, but then finding how AI champions can actually lead the charge, right? So getting them ahead of everybody else, defining the use cases, seeing the results, using those as use cases you can effectively publish down to everybody else to follow. Because I think that takes a lot of the fear and anxiety out. Often the kind of the most diligent workers in a business are the last to adopt a new technology because they don't want to get it wrong, or they don't want to make a mistake, or they don't want to leak something, right? And so getting permission and sort of psychological safety to those people of it's a tool, we've sanctioned it, go use it, but actually here's how you can take your first steps. That massively accelerates that adoption curve. This is what I'm definitely seeing in businesses. And I think that permission is actually different in AI than it has been in other technologies. It was almost mandatory use before, whereas AI is, we really want to use it, we see the benefits, but we're not forcing it because you can't force it until you know the use cases that people will have to use, right? So that kind of rollout of licenses, I think Microsoft called it the chasm of despair or something. In one of their official reports last year, they saw across their 200,000 users that they surveyed or something, everybody gets really excited in week one, and by week two, it's like gym usage in February, right? It's absolutely tanked. And then slowly, as people work back up that adoption curve, they get to real value, towards the much later months. But what happens to trigger people's re-engagement with the licenses that they stop using is where I'm seeing AI champions, enablement programs, kind of practical hands-on days, experiment days, hackathons almost. Those kind of things have become really powerful because the technology has to be hands-on for you to get better at it. That's the only way it works. It also gets better the more you use it, right? Because of memory and inference and all those things. So yeah, it's a kind of a double-edged sword of having to use it to understand it. Once you use it, it gets better anyway, and you get better results as time goes on. It's compounding.
Those hackathons and the hands-on thing I resonates a lot. I think I have a team of developers, right, and we use AI to code assist. We don't vibe code, but we definitely code assist. And the ones who are adopting it are the ones who play with it the most, the ones who see what it can do. A lot of the early usage, I assume, for people is just using it as a Google replacement, right? They just go in there and just do that. That's not what the companies want them to do. They want them to find the use cases. What are some of these good use cases you're starting to see coming out? And I mean, maybe it's per business and it's different in all different areas, or are you starting to see some kind of coalescence around certain processes that are really useful for it?
I mean, I certainly do. I think there are certain tasks that are common to most knowledge workers, right? So the average knowledge worker across, I think, Europe, the UK, and the US spends 1 day a week in PowerPoint or another deck creation software, both reading them and creating them. If you could get summaries of those, if you could start to create those from meeting notes and all those kind of things, I think there's real value in that. I personally have a problem with brand fit, but that's my pixel perfect eye. So I think things like that become really interesting use cases. And then there are the basics. Meeting note takers, like when was the last time you went to a meeting that wasn't recorded in some way, right? We used to spend so much time taking good notes that I'd miss half a conversation in a room, and now I'm able to be present and fully functioning in that meeting, knowing that my plethora of different AI note takers that there are nowadays, plus the ones that other people are going to send me, are capturing that information. I think summaries of long documents, I think comparing documents one to another and finding variations between them, catch me up on this email thread or catch me up on my entire inbox whilst I've been out for a day. Those use cases are pretty ubiquitous across most people in reality. I think then you niche down very quickly. So, farmer versus law versus a cabinet maker, they're all very different use cases. But the functionality of taking out the repetitive things or the assimilating of data or information in some way are things that AI absolutely excels at. You have to be considerate about what you're sharing where and what's happening to that. But I think those use cases are becoming the ones that people go to first. Then you sort of mature a little bit. Everyone will talk about agents. I think agents are incredibly scary for most businesses right now, with good reason. But I think chaining of tools becomes really interesting. So take meeting notes, bring that into your Google Suite or your MS Suite, build a presentation off of that, build a second summary off of that goes to an exec board level. Those chaining of tools takes so much time out of people's days. And then we can go and do the things that only humans do, right? Build relationships, be truly creative, think of novel ideas. Those aren't things that AI is good at, and potentially won't be for quite some time. So although there's this massive speed of features and functions, I think the core tenet of the basics are repeatable work, huge data transformation. It will work forever without being tiresome. It will do something at 2 a.m. in the morning when you're quite happily asleep. Those are the baselines that people should build on as things that won't change in the short term.
Yeah, super interesting. That chaining of workflows and pulling things together, it also conjures up in my mind the idea of vibe coding as well, right? Using the likes of Lovable, Replit and things. Are you seeing that within businesses at all, or are they kind of shying away from that because, the underlying code within those tends to be a bit insecure, and or are they? I guess they can use them internally for some things. Are you seeing any of that at all?
I've seen a little bit. I worked with a bank in the UK, and what they do as part of their product team is they use Lovable to create pilots. So they kind of show what is possible, but they haven't actually put it into practice. They haven't deployed it really. So I've only had a few clients that are kind of using it for that reason, but I do find the actual usage of those tools are mainly like businesses like ours, or but yeah, I'm not really seeing a huge adoption of those tools at the moment, unless it's just for creating pilots.
Yeah, similar experience. I think the MVP pilot stuff is where that is really being leveraged. I think, back in the early 2000s, you used MS Paint and then send that to my creative team, right? And I think this is the modern equivalent of like, I know I want a dashboard or an interface, or I've got an app idea. Rather than that being 2D in a PowerPoint, I'm now showing you a working example. I think what's really changed in the last few weeks in reality is interactive artifacts inside Claude. Those I saw hardly anybody doing HTML stuff prior to that. I create HTML presentations because I can get them to look better. They're more interactive. I'm now doing proposals through HTML and then chunking those out to PDFs. I saw yesterday 3 or 4 different examples in a room of people who are building HTML artifacts for them to use internally in their team meetings, in their presentations. So I think that kind of shift of where people are outputting work to has been really interesting, because our go-to has been Word and PowerPoint for a long time, Excel as well. So I think the interactive nature of those, as humans, we absorb stuff better that way. We want the story, right? We don't want the output. And I think AI is allowing the story to be more buildable by more people, which is, I think, super interesting.
Yeah, that brings up an interesting question of like, working within the Claude environment or working within your Copilot. Do you see people like mix and matching quite a lot and getting lots of different licenses, or are they kind of going, well, the company said I've got to use this one, so I've got to use this one? I guess it depends on how much budget they want to spend and how advanced they want to get.
Yeah, I think it's a real mix as well. I think I'm working with a client at the moment. They are solely Microsoft Copilot, but because they've seen all of the joys and wisdom that people are saying about Claude, they've just bought 10 Claude licenses because they want to test that out. So I think you get a mixed bag. You do have those businesses that are like, no, we're going to stick with Microsoft because we know Microsoft and it's already there in our tenant, in our domain. So we'll buy some licenses. But you are having those other businesses that are going, oh, okay, hang on, that's piqued my interest. I'm gonna have a look there, which isn't the worst thing to do. I think the worst thing you can do is have a huge amount of licenses for both. Don't do that. But if you want to kind of test, if you want to test out something like this client is that I'm working with now, then buying like 5 to 10 licenses in a huge company is not the worst thing to do.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things I'd add to that. I think ecosystem is real, and as we promote to tell people, context is like really important when it comes to AI, right? So if you're in an MS environment or in a Google environment, then that tool makes more sense for you because it has all of your context. I think the other thing that kind of gets forgotten is that is then where your security comes in, right? So if you're in a tenant and you're in your Microsoft environment, that's great. You can do what you want with that. I think the idea that just giving people an additional license is probably additionally scary to most businesses, because then you've then got this, moving of context between two locations, and that's where things ultimately get dropped, right? And that's where security issues come in. I am a big proponent of right tool for the right job. I think for most people, if you are working in one of those two environments, you're not missing out by using Copilot now. You probably were 6 months ago. The fact that they now have both the Anthropic and OpenAI models in there means you can choose, even with that environment, you now get a right tool for the right job kind of selection. And I think I'm starting to see a proliferation of businesses who have a standard tool, be it Copilot, for instance, and then certain departments will get, a Codex for the dev team or a Claude for the marketing team. So there's an additional layer rather than it being, swapped effectively. And that's when, again, chaining of tools doesn't always work within the capabilities of one tool. You can chain those across different platforms and different LLMs as well. So you can still use all that context and security out of your main one for 80% of your tasks. You only take out what you need, put that into the tool that actually give you the output, the polished, finished output that is the goal you're aiming for. So I'm seeing much more of that nowadays. But again, like Scott, I would say that actually, 3 tools per person in the business is ridiculous. It's choose the one that is the 90% fit for what you do, because in reality, you didn't have this tool a year ago and you were doing your job anyway.
Yeah.
Again, it's finding that thing of what do we need it for? Find what you need it for and then purchase what you need. I think it goes back to that adage, really.
So I guess that comes into the AI strategy, and then kind of it also talks to AI governance and making sure that you have got your ducks in a row before you do all these things. How do you approach talking to small or any kind of business really about what they should think about when it comes to AI governance? Because it's a whole new area for them.
Yeah, so I think when it comes to AI governance, it's no different, right? So I'm from an old school consulting background, right? Process mapping, the 3 V's of data, the 5 Whys, like all the classics, I think are coming back is the reality, because people need to truly understand their business. So if you are taking a turbocharging element like AI and slapping it onto a process that is broken or ill-defined, you'll find out really quickly at scale what bad and chaos looks like, right? So I think it's truly understanding your process, understanding the happy path of that process and the unhappy path of that process, then figuring out where there are issues, why those issues exist. Then I think the 3 V's of data, the 3 V's of data even, which is very hard to say, it turns out today, volume, veracity, and variety, right? Where does it sit? How much of it is there? What's actually in it? Is it labeled well? And how quickly does it move? And where does it move to and from? Though that last piece for me is where most people trip up when it comes to AI. I think there was a pretty famous Samsung leak last year where 3 coders put their entire code base into an LLM and said, optimize this for me. That was an entirely proprietary IP regulated code base. And that effectively, it's called a leak, right? It's not like I could then just search for it and find it. But actually what's happened is it's taken the data out of their tenant, sent it somewhere, and it now lives in a server somewhere else that is not owned by Samsung anymore. That was for, I think, the way that they check chips for quality after processing, something like that. So something that Samsung would be pretty wanting to keep to themselves, right? So that's, I think, most of what we consider to be leaks is very different to normal. If we saw, if you see leaks, it's normally that the entire information is shared on Twitter in seconds, whereas this is more about ownership of the code sitting in someone else's server, not being fully controlled by you. And in the case of AI, I think the chances of someone being precise enough in their prompt, even though that data now sits in the training data underneath that LLM, the idea of you being able to prompt exactly enough to get that exact code back out is, I wouldn't say it's infinitesimal, right? It's not impossible, but it's very, very small. So I think AI is different to that in many ways. I think the regulated industries are obviously doing a better job of this. I think things like Copilot, again, having that enterprise security infrastructure in place, you can go single tenant on those things. You can then move to even a private LLM, right? You can get that far down the road if you want to. I remember talking to an American firm who do some defense contract work, and I couldn't proceed in the project because I'm not an American citizen. So their data can't leave the US. It can't even leave their servers. It is a strict policy of what they share between themselves even. So things like that, I think, are where you need to start, is to truly understand your constraints. And then, like anything else, you build a really sensible policy. Like I remember when everyone first started traveling with laptops, VPNs weren't, mandatory. I would make nearly anybody who worked for me have a VPN on their machine if they were traveling, because if you're sitting in a Costa and someone's a bit clever, they're interrupting all your traffic, right? And they're getting everything up from your machine. Not sure what everyone would want my traffic, but it can happen. But things like that, company devices, having it on your own devices versus a company device that's regulated, locked down. Hard disks are coded, encrypted at rest. All those things. I don't think AI is incredibly different to normal. I just think many businesses don't think about it in the depth they should anyway, and then AI is the reason to trigger that rethinking. And then we see AI policies being built. We see almost like mini AI boards being set up, and their job really is to make sure that AI policy is continually reviewed, because it is different to traditional IT. If you're buying machines and you're buying infrastructure and you're buying SaaS software, that doesn't change very often. Whereas the capabilities, features, and functions and what's released to the end user is often moving at quite a pace. So having a policy of like restricted until approved, Claude Cowork comes out, Copilot Cowork comes out, are you just pushing that to every user who has a license? I would suggest probably not, until you've enabled them around it, right? What to do, what not to do, what's in our policy around this, what's not in our policy around this. So I think it's a reason to review what the basics should have been anyway. But the reality is lots of people, especially smaller businesses, don't go to the level of depth that the basics should be. And you see that in obviously bigger enterprise businesses who have what they consider to be more to lose. But actually, I think some of these things are way more impactful to smaller businesses than they are big businesses.
Yeah, and I'd kind of add to that in terms around the policy for all those smaller businesses. When people talk about policies, everyone's like, oh God, policies, audits, or they're going to have to draft this huge document. It's like, well, no, you don't. Like Richard said, you need to kind of just have a look at what your business has and what you want in the business as well. So an AI policy can just be like one page if you want it to be. I'd advise maybe a couple of pages, depending on how big your business is. But, what tools are approved, what data can go in and out of them. Like client data, financials, IP, who to ask if you're unsure, because we're talking about leaks and stuff. Most of these breaches and leaks, they're not malicious. It's someone just pasting client information in there unaware in a free ChatGPT tool because they haven't been told and there's no policy around it. So if you just have those couple of pages in there to tell people on how to interact with AI, what you should and shouldn't do, and then also have like a list of where AI is being used in the business, because just from the clients I've worked with, not to throw any of them under the bus, but you'd be absolutely amazed to find how many people don't know what tools are being used in the business. Like marketing might be using like a video generation one, or there might actually be tools that are already in the existing tech stack that have introduced AI that they haven't even thought about, and now their data's going in there. They're using the little AI function that's in there because it's cool and new, but do they know how it's being used? Has it gone through like another vendor assessment, for instance, and stuff? Kind of going off piece now, but just having that kind of policy structure in place, knowing what tools are actually in the business and how they're being used, and then just making sure that you've got like a human in the loop for things, or anything that's client facing, or especially decision making with like the EU AI Act and stuff like that. If you're dealing with EU customers, those kind of things are like high risk. So just making sure that you have all of those things in place, and you should be fine. And you can put the majority of that in place fairly quick with the use of AI as well, and understanding your business.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly helpful advice to people.
It also comes down to that, Rob. Sorry,
go for it.
Add to that is, for most people who are starting out, not knowing what you don't know is probably the biggest risk, right? So all of these businesses who are training LLMs on data obviously want more data, right? They've already scraped the entire internet, so they want every conversation, they want every piece of data you share. So by default, the sharing is there. So when someone logs into ChatGPT or OpenAI or Claude or whoever for the first time, it's configured to share. right? So you'll be training, your data will be going into their servers, and you'll be training their LLM on your data going forward. So we've spent a decent amount of time in the Foundry giving people the very basics of, once you sign up, here are the basic things you need to go and do to give yourself the best level of protection you can at every tier of paying for stuff. Obviously, as you get into enterprise accounts outside of personal accounts, even if you're paying for a personal account, you're not getting the level of protection you would on an enterprise account, for instance. There's this kind of preconception that, well, I'm paying for it, so it's all mine. That's not the case. You're renting a capability, right? So doing those basics gets you some way there. And if you don't know that those basics exist, then you're obviously sharing more than you want to be, ideally. But that's just that's a knowledge thing, right? If you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And kind of where I'm moving on to with the next question is like, you need a consultant. You need someone who understands it. It's this new tool, it's this new capability, and you need someone who's kind of on, like you guys out there, understanding it as best they can, so they can pass it on to the customers and the small businesses that you advise. But there's a lot of noise out there, right? There's a lot of, I'm not going to say bad actors, but people who are calling themselves AI consultants who don't necessarily understand some of these basic points. How does a company, a small business, spot the difference between someone who knows what they're talking about and doesn't? Because it is a new world. It's a bit Wild Westy in some respects. You guys have already spoken about some of the great, amazing claims that are online in terms of 100xing a business in 2 months. How do you go about figuring out who's good and who's bad?
I think there's a couple of things, and obviously Richard can jump in on this as well. But first of all, you can come to our event on the 4th of June, where we will help you build your AI strategy and policy. If you go to wearefoundry.ai/events, it's there. But then also, I think it's one of the things I notice is proof. A lot of people are talking a lot of stuff. You go on LinkedIn, there's lots of text saying X, Y, and Z, but then there's no proof behind it. There's no like pictures of them working with their clients. There's no like real use cases and stuff like that. So I think trying to block out those people, trying to follow people that actually show real world use cases, showing that they're really dealing with clients and showing like a real return of investment as well in the work that they're doing. I think that's where you'll start to be able to kind of cut out the noise. I mean, everyone's got to start somewhere. So everyone kind of wings it a little bit, but you can really tell the ones that are out there, they're just spitting out thought leadership. I know we do a little bit of thought leadership, but they're literally, that's all they do, and there's no substance behind it. So I think if you can find those people who have those real use cases, they're showing real return of investment and getting those really good customer testimonials as well, then that's a good place to start.
Yeah, I think you hit at the end, it's the customer testimonials, right? Like, it's the same as buying software. You'd want to see some reviews, you want some independent reviews, not just the 5 stars on their website that they decide to show, right? I think, asking to speak to someone who they've worked with and clearly verifying that makes a difference. It's a little bit of work up front. I think the ability to trust someone is something we as humans kind of tangibly feel as well when you first interact with someone. So I wouldn't say that it's more than, you have to like the person you're working with, right? You could be I've seen people in this industry over the last couple of years who are obviously incredibly talented, really smart, but their interaction style for me did not work, and I will not work in or around those people. So I think finding someone you're comfortable with, who then has some substance and proven delivery ability behind that, is kind of where you start. And I don't think it's different to buying anything else. There's just more noise around this than there has been anything else for quite a while, I think, is the reality. So clearing the noise to find the signal is harder in reality. I think the other thing that's interesting, especially if you're, say, a small business that's looking for a website build and, AEO, so answer engine optimization, rather than just a traditional SEO, ask AI, because if you can't find the person you're thinking of working with through, an AI tool, and they're not even able to get their own website listed and recommended, then it's probably a little indicator that they're not going to do a great job on yours as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I also like the piece about the human element of it and the human relationship. That's always, and I'm glad that's still part of the conversation, right? We're not just dealing completely with AI. So,
yeah. Well, I had that the other day. I literally had someone call a past client of mine just to find out if I was kind of legit and if they wanted to work with me or not. So those conversations are happening, and it's the best thing to do.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, second to last question, and it's I'd like some predictions, gentlemen, about where you see the world going in the next. I'm not going to say 5 years because who knows what that would be, but 12 to 18 months. Where do you see, especially where you're working and what you're doing? Where are you seeing the big changes, flavors coming through? What's your thoughts?
I think for me, if we're looking 12 to 18 months out, what we're going to see is this not be a new thing, it just becomes a thing. I think we will start to see the increase in spending on enablement to actually drive adoption. We'll see then, I think, the proliferation of the idea that people manage processes, and some of those processes will be agent driven. Even this week, actually, like last night, I think Gemini are coming out with an agent. Effectively, it's being run internally right now. We've got some agentic capabilities in Copilot already. We see that in Claude. Claude is bringing out, I think it's called Orbit, which is a scaffolded way of running, agentic processes inside the existing ecosystem you have, not having to build that outside. I think the early adopters are all obviously very sort of DIY or kit based. If you think about people building things, they're taping stuff together to make it work because they want to be ahead of the curve and they want to see the benefits of that. Businesses are not ever going to be in that space, right? They're going to want control, they're going to want observability, they're going to want all of the things we talked about around security and risk, surfaces and all those things controlled. So I think we'll see that being the next, gold rush effectively, is getting agents into businesses. And I think the cultural change is one that we're perhaps underprepared for. I think many of the roles that we have today will become much more focused on being an individual contributor who has a series of agents and perhaps some human collaborators as well. But these smaller, more targeted teams who do use the tools to leverage, an increase in productivity effectively. There's a really interesting phenomenon at the moment that CEOs are leaving fairly well-known businesses, Workday and a few others, to go and take IC roles at companies like Anthropic because they can clearly see where this is going, right? So if you want to leave a CEO role to become an IC, there's going to have to be a pretty impactful goal you're working towards, right? Most people will think that's general intelligence, so truly artificial life. I'm not sure we're there in the even midterm from where we are today, but I think we will be at the point where you can have a business brain where all of your information exists and is linked and is correlated in ways that make sense, and then you can build an agentic layer over that, with then the humans being the instigator and the reviewer of those outputs effectively. That's what I think business will look like, maybe 18 months from now. There'll obviously be the laggards, right? There'll always be that. We talked about the adoption curve earlier. I think the businesses who are in the how can I reduce my bottom line to increase my top line will do that early. I think we'll see some mistakes. We've seen, Salesforce got rid of 4,000 people last year, right? To increase or to leverage AI in their customer service areas. They then came out not even 6 months later and said the LLMs were not where we expected them to be. We've rehired a considerable number of those people. So we'll see the pendulum swing. I think it obviously goes one way, it goes too far. We'll see it settle back into the middle, and I think that's what will happen over the 18 months. We'll find the equilibrium that matters. We'll find where the tools really add value and will enable people enough to use them in ways that businesses are comfortable using them.
Amazing. Scott, what do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree with everything Richard said. And I also, one of the things I actually posted about it on LinkedIn this morning, I spent my bloody life on there at the minute. But I think there's another point of this whole thing around, there's a whole conversation around AI is going to wipe out workforces and stuff like that. I mean, I think that's a bit overstated. I think not because it's not capable. I mean, it's pretty good. But I think there's going to be a big difference in terms of price over the next kind of like 18 to 24 months. We've already seen I think it was Anthropic removed Claude Code from the $20 a month plan. So they're already starting to tinker around with prices. And I think what you're going to find is that we're in this grace period now where it's like, use all of our stuff, it's free, or it's $20 to get all the features, but they're hemorrhaging cash every month. So I don't see this going on for much longer. And you're going to have to, as a business, you're going to have to start thinking, I can't just implement a load of AI or a load of agents and just call it a plan. You're going to have to think carefully about where AI actually earns its cost. So you need to be more strategic around it. And I think there's going to be a lot of change around cost over the next, like I said, 12 to 18 months or 24 months. And I think we're going to see a shift in how people implement it. So you have all these people race for it. I think there's going to be a little bit of a stop where people go, okay, hang on, it's costing a lot now. So what do we actually need it for? Going back to that thing that we were talking about before, what is the pain point? Where can we actually use it, and where is it cost effective? So that's kind of where I see it going as well.
Yeah, I'd add to that. I think I would treat if I owned a sizable business, I would treat AI like an outsourcing opportunity, and you do your diligence around that, right? So, moving offshore obviously reduce the material human labour cost effectively. I saw a really interesting article earlier this week, I think, where a company has gone all in on agents, and the average agent token spend per day now is $300. Well, that's £100,000 a year or $100,000 a year salary straight off the bat. So whilst you think you've replaced an engineer, yes, you've replaced an engineer, but you haven't reduced the cost in any way, shape, or form. So I think that outsourcing is an interesting one. I think the cost of these tools will increase. We've got OpenAI and Anthropic both probably targeting an IPO later this year. Once they are public businesses, we know what happens to public businesses who have been burning cash to get to IPO. That suddenly will become, where does every dollar go, and where does every dollar come from? And that, I think, will be a huge change that will catch quite a lot of people out who have gone hard and early on rolling AI out across their businesses. Because when that $30 per month line item goes to $300 or $3,000, what does that do to your business?
Yeah, I think that's definitely this underlying tidal wave, or I don't know, that's not a great analogy, but there's definitely this wave of cost coming, which I think, are you right? I think there's a lot of not naivety, but kind of maybe burying heads in sand, or making hay while the sun shines. I guess that's the other piece.
Yeah, I think it's great to make hay when the sun shines, but if you need that grass every single day, it's already hay. You're a bit stuffed, right? So I think, the cognizance of that being an issue. The interesting conversation I was having yesterday, again in a sizable business, was with the head of IT there, the new CTO. They're like, these things are not line items yet. We're not thinking far enough ahead. We're already, we're still working on last year's budgets that didn't even have AI as a thought process, let alone a cost line, right? So what does that look like for next year? But where do we find that budget from? Because it's not going to come from nowhere. And I think we're seeing lots of the big headlines around job losses. I think we're at 100,000 jobs lost across the US as far as AI being the reason for those job losses being cited. But really what they're doing is they're cutting the human labour costs to increase AI infrastructure spending. Whether that sticks for the long term, again, I think that's a thesis we would all hold a potential outcome to that we'll see only with the fullness of time. But I think it's definitely a conversation that if you're not having, is one that you should be having, of what are our AI costs today and where is our buffer for if those AI costs increase massively.
Yeah, one other point I wanted to pick up from Richard, what you said earlier, was about the business brain, and that being pretty central to where the future goes. And I think we're seeing that a lot of people talking about their data being that they're basically where their future lies, and gathering it all together and getting it in a format in which it can be used by a business brain or agents in some ways is really important as well. So we're definitely seeing that from our perspective.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think there's a whole nother hour I could do just on really the way you structure that. The token costs of having a huge data set are huge right now, because what it's going to do is going to try and read all of that into context. Then you get context rot and you get reduced output and all those kind of things. So actually, I think there'll be the opportunity for most businesses and probably for a lot of consultants in the midterm is really about how do you structure those to be correct, human usable, but AI usable in a token efficient way. It's something that certainly that I look at probably once a week and think I'm going to do something on that, and then don't have the time and never get back to it. But yeah, the idea of the second brain, an infinite brain, a business database, those things I think will become, most of us trade on what we know, right? And a business knows more than any individual. So if you can consolidate that into a place that you then put these incredible intelligence tools over, there's real value in that for most businesses.
Yes, as you say, we could go on about this for hours, but we won't. Maybe we'll get you back on the podcast in the future and see if some of these things have come true, or where they've deviated, and we've seen other things happen. So
we can have our Mystic Meg moment.
Exactly. So, last question, and I ask this to everyone who comes on the podcast. It's a bit silly, but hopefully it's amusing. If the AI Foundry was a song or a band or a soundtrack, who would it be, or what would it be, and why?
God, I could be a bit cheesy.
Cheesy is good.
I don't know, maybe like Bob Marley. Is it Three Little Birds? Don't worry about a thing, because everything will be all right. We're here to hold your hand and take you through the process. It's a bit cheesy, but it's the only thing that came to the top of my mind.
I love it. No, that's great. I love that. Richard, you're a DJ, so you've probably got quite a large catalogue of music in your mind.
Well, what you've done there is you've absolutely set me up to fail.
Sorry.
My mind instantly went to Bon Jovi. We're halfway there. Yeah, maybe it's a soundtrack to the Never-Ending Story. I don't know. I think genuinely, like, everyone's coming at it from such a different perspective. There probably isn't one thing that unites everybody. Because I think, some people come at it from such a place of fear. Well, you probably get some death metal record going on. I think some people are really optimistic. I think a bit of reggae would fit nicely in there. But the reality is most people are just trying to find value in it, right? And it's just it's a really perfunctory thing. And that probably doesn't really give you a great end to this podcast. But yeah, maybe I would say Bon Jovi, we're halfway there.
Okay.
Some of us are living on a prayer.
Love it. Gents, thank you so much for being on the podcast. What a great conversation. I think everyone out there is going to, it's very interesting the way you're approaching things and how you're seeing the world. It's right on the cutting edge of what businesses are doing. If people want to get in contact, I'll put your emails or your LinkedIn in the description. Any particular way, I'll put the AI Foundry website on there as well. Is that the best way to contact you?
Yeah, definitely is.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So it's just We Are Foundry at AI. That's nice. We Are Foundry.ai.
Good luck with everything. Look forward to speaking again. But thank you. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Much appreciated.
Appreciate it. Cheers, Rob.
Thanks. Thanks for listening to the Old Street Labs podcast. We'd love to hear from you. So connect with us on LinkedIn or on our website at old.st.